Hey there, everybody. Thank you for tuning in and watching my live stream demo at the Corning Museum of Glass studio. I'm going to be demonstrating a spoon pipe that looks like a laying down voodoo doll today. And I'll be assisted by my awesome TA, Trina, in answering questions along the way. And I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to start out with a clear borosilicate bubble. And the first thing I'm going to do is add this frit powdered glass to the surface, and that's going to how I achieve the coloration of like a leathery red surface. We'll be adding a lot of texture using found objects and also traditional glass tools. One of my first early steps before I frit it up, actually, I'm going to take this black glass, I'm going to heat it up and stretch out very thin threads, and those will become stitches for my doll. So we'll start with that. Just heat a very small amount of glass.
What color are you using right now?
This is Eclipse Black from Glass Alchemy. For me, I found that it's black that stays nice and dense and doesn't melt in or thin out throughout my process. With all my colors, I test a lot of different colors before I decide which color fits my needs. An Eclipse I've been using for at least 12 years for this same purpose. So it's a very thin thread of glass. So that will be what I use for my glass stitches. I already have a bunch pulled, so you don't have to watch me for pulling stringers for 20 minutes. All right, now I'm going to go to the kiln and grab my clear borosilicate glass and begin to add frit. So here's the hollow tubing. I'll preheat the surface. My mic has fallen. There you go. I bet you can hear me a lot better now. So I'm heating the whole surface of that clear, and I'm going to do a series of rolls through the powdered glass until I achieve the opacity I'm shooting for.
Is it powder or just a fine grain?
This is a
grit?
fine grit frit. Size 70 Glass Alchemy. I don't worry about melting it entirely in until I have many layers on. I don't seem to have any problems trapping air in this color, so I can really cake it on and get it nice and dense. This is also a striking color, so it might appear transparent or like a livery light pink while I'm working on it, but as it gets worked on and heated, it's going to get deeper and deeper red. After the kiln cycle, when it comes out and is finished, it'll be a really nice deep red.
Did you say what color that was?
This is Persimmon Strike, my very favorite color to work with. What I love about this color is it really kind of shows your flame and heat history. Areas that get hotter during the process where I weld things together get darker. And when I sandblast, because all of my work after it's finished hot is then sandblasted to achieve that fabric appearance, it looks very weathered and beaten, and I feel like that is a fitting aesthetic for a little voodoo doll. So make sure I'm coating that bubble at all areas, including the tip, so that he doesn't have male pattern baldness, clear spot on his head. So for any flame workers out there who are watching, I should explain that the first 12 years of my glass blowing experience were all at the furnace. So you might notice I work a lot on one handle, and there's going to be some moves here that look like hot shot moves. I've just adapted what I already knew to my torch working. There's no wrong way to do anything. I encourage you to try as many different techniques as you can and find the ones that you're comfortable with and that work for you, because that's worked for me.
How did you get started making the voodoo doll in particular?
Well, when I transitioned to flame working, I'd previously been working on Venetian vessels, vases, bowls, goblets. That's where I built my glass chops. And I sold those at craft shows around the country, and I was really kind of checking off boxes of what I thought the consumers wanted. And when I started to flame work, I had no audience in mind and decided I wanted to just make whatever made me happy. And as a child growing up, I was always really into stop motion animation, Tim Burton's aesthetic, so I immediately just started trying to achieve that feel through my glass. So I started trying to stitch things. The first thing I made was a little spoon with some stitches and a button on it. I was also very inspired by Dan Coyle. When I met him, was doing a money project, which was the statue that he'd bring around the country and collab with different artists and have really cool narratives that they develop between their two techniques. So I wanted to come up with a character that I could do the same with. And then the voodoo doll has a lot of meaning to me. Excuse me for one moment. Slight inflation. Basically, when I was transitioning from furnace work to flame work, I had lost my ability to control the glass as well as I could have. I had a newborn child, so I was readjusting to the fact that I didn't have complete control over my schedule and how much I could work. My soft glass craft business had kind of fallen off in 2008 when I was transitioning. I definitely felt like my life was a little out of my own control. So the voodoo doll kind of represents that time period where I felt like maybe somebody else was pulling the strings on what was going down in my life, poking me now and then. And what I found was when I started to not think about the audience or what my audience wanted, and I just made what I wanted to make, that's when people connected with my work. And that's when people started collecting my work. It was very quickly embraced, especially by the pipe world. I was lucky enough that I developed an aesthetic on my own that nobody else was really doing, and I've been doing it ever since. And I love it, and I keep adding techniques to improve and develop my aesthetic. All right, so now I have my colored bubble. This is hot, so it's looking orange. I can show you an example of what this color is going to look like as it sits. As it sits in the kiln, I do have parts that I've prepped. It gets to that deeper red. So the first thing I'm going to do with this bubble is shape out the head, which will become the bowl of the piece. And this is a hot shot move. I'm going to use a blow hose and my hot shop jacks, and I'm going to define a jack line, and I'm going to be slightly inflating as I define a jack line and pull away, and that will also at the same move develop the shoulder area of the doll. So this bubble will be the head and body. All the arms and limbs will be added separately. Use a lot of heat and gravity to help me shape as well. So I now have this body portion and this head portion. Now I'm going to inflate that head portion to get it to the size and shape that I prefer.
So someone online is asking what size the blank is, what size tubing you started with.
I started with a 25 mil heavy walled tubing.
So heavy wall or extra heavy?
Extra heavy wall, thank you.
So probably like 3
this
or
is why I
4
have my
millimeters
assistant
thick.
with a
Yeah.
microphone.
So it gives you
And it's on a 12/7 heavy wall, extra heavy wall handle as well.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I will say I'll be skipping some steps here just for time's sake so that I can get this piece done. I have a lot of parts prepped in the kiln, but then also examples of how I made them. So I'm gonna do a little chef show action here. I grew up watching Julia Child, and this is about as close as I'm gonna get to being Julia.
When you're typically working, do you work similarly where you make things like a bunch of prep work one day and sculpt it out a little bit more the next day, or do you make a piece start to finish?
I usually work on multiple pieces at a time and prep for the next piece while I work on one piece. I multitask for sure. I find it's a nice way to ensure I put these things away in the kiln and let them soak and even out in temperature while I'm doing something else, and don't rush through the process. This might be a little quicker than I normally work at home. Okay, almost done defining the head shape. That looks pretty good to me as far as size and shape. I do keep my bubbles pretty thick. This allows me to add a lot of texture and stitches without actually changing the forms. If it was too thin, a lot of the next moves I'm doing would just collapse the bubble. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut a line with a butter knife around what I'm going to develop as the seam of the head. That's just a nice surface heat. And I run that knife along the surface, and because the knife has the teeth still on it, they haven't been ground off, they leave a dotted line in that crease that looks hyper realistic.
This is definitely important to have a good wall thickness to get the effect that you want.
Yes, yeah, if this was too thin, you'd already see this form changing shape. I really want to maintain the structure of the bubbles, so thick is good in this instance. Also, it's a functional piece, it's a pipe. I know when I started buying pipes, I liked a good chunky pipe that if for some reason I did drop it, it would be still in one piece when I did. I'm not encouraging you to drop it, but durability is a factor in functional work. All right, so now I have that first seam, and now is when I employ the use of the threaded glass I pulled at the very beginning. And I'm going to start by adding one stitched eye in the mouth, and then some stitches all around the seam. So I'll flash the bubble, and then I'll go to a very small flame and start stitching. Now I'm going to leave a little gap in the top because to work on the body, I'm going to have to pop a hole and transfer this onto another blowpipe. But later on in the piece, I will close that back off and stitch it up.
We have another question. Someone's asking, how tall is the doll going to be? So maybe
Need a
like
ruler,
4 inches or so?
4 to 6 inches.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty small one. And he's going to be laying down flat out.
When you first started flame working, coming from the hot shop, what did you find was one of the most challenging things, the differences?
Keeping the glass warm, like flame chemistry, figuring out how to work this torch. At first I relied really heavily, like right now as I talk, I'm just keeping this warm with torch heat. When I first started, I relied very much on putting it in the kiln a lot between every move to try to even the heat that way. So when you're working furnace glass, you're on a blowpipe, your reheating chamber is the glory hole. And so at first in my head, the kiln was the glory hole. But now as I've learned how to use my torch, I have various flame chemistries and annealing flames that I can use to keep the glass warm enough to keep working it continuously without stopping. And like this is flashing in the glory hole. All right, I'm going to go in on some of those details. I might be a little more quiet as I try not to make squiggly lines. This is the precision stuff here.
You can see he made his flame much smaller, so he has a lot more control with the really skinny pieces of glass.
So I draw on the lines. I'm gonna make this guy smirking. You can do a lot with just the position of the mouth and expression. At first, all my voodoo dolls were really, really sad. And some years into making them, I realized I was selling a lot of work. I had this beautiful family at home. Life was good, so then they started being a lot more happy and that frown turned upside down.
Question from the online audience. Is there a piece that you've made that you loved so much you didn't want to sell it?
Yes. I did a series called Portraits and Dwellings. And they were a shadow box series. Some of them I created little rooms, vignettes with one functional piece that removed. And then I did 3 pieces that were framed portraits, busts of 3 different characters. I kept a little girl all in black and white with a doll on her shoulder that I named Emily and named it after my daughter, and it's in my living room. So now that I have some lines on there, they just look like melted glass on top of glass. But using a tungsten pick, I can heat up the end of that stringer, grab that termination, pull, stretch, and push, and then it makes it look like it's actually stitched into the glass.
And the tungsten pick's a great tool for this because you can actually put it in the flame. And you can't do that with any of your other tools.
It's definitely one of my favorite tools. I use it quite a bit. Okay. So you'll notice he only has one eye right now. The other eye is going to be a button, but the way I apply the button is actually can add a lot of stress to the piece. So what I choose to do is add the button at the very end of the piece. Less cracking issues. So now I'm just stitching that seam together.
What would you say is the one piece that took you the longest to make?
One class I taught in Texas with a really great glassblower, Phil Siegel. We made a voodoo priest bust about this large. I think it was maybe a week-long class, and we maybe slept 2 hours a day. And then actually it was one of the most difficult pieces to mask and blast as well. So I like to, in my blasting process, like mask off certain areas that I want to look like metal or plastic to keep them glossy, and that requires a lot of like tape, and sometimes I use like a putty to cover things up. It's just a tedious, slow process. Yeah, I would say that. And the portraits and dwelling series were a large undertaking as well, because they required the fabrication of shadow boxes and a lot of other elements. All right, so now I've got his smirk, his seam stitched together. Next, I want to make this look more like burlap, and it took me years to find the right tool to do this. And I have to give praise to my mentor, Ed Branson Glass, who I worked for years in the hot shop. He always encouraged, and he still does when he teaches, he encourages you to find tools that aren't glass tools. Go to your kitchen, go to your hardware store, find something cool, and a new tool alone can lead to a whole new direction for you. So for years, these were just smooth and sandblasted. Now I take this strainer from Sur la Table, specifically this strainer works the best, and I'm going to surface heat and press that against the glass. Again, I'm very conscious of not overheating my bubble. I do not want to change the shape of the head while I do this. And I'll see if after I add this I can show it to the camera so you can see the texture that has been added. Right there I overheated it and I saw the wall move in a little bit, so I just gave it a little inflation to reestablish my shape. So I don't know if the camera can pick up that texture now that makes the surface look like burlap. And now one extra element is these seams. If you look at clothes, when they bunch together, there's lots of little creases. So now with a knife, I will add some creases around the seams. I'm going to start to try to move a little more quickly for timing. So now there's those creases that make it look like bunched fabric. Now I'm going to pop a hole in the top so I can transfer this around and work on the body. I'll attach a blow hose. And with my mini torch, make a nice tiny hole right in the center of the head. Testament to how thick that bubble was how long it took to get that bubble to pop. Use a reamer to open that hole just a little bit. Try to keep it pretty small so I'm not really changing the form too much, and it'll be easy to close back up on the other end. I'll multitask here. This is a 10 mil heavy wall tubing that I'll transfer to. I'm going to plug the end of that opening so that I can inflate at that seam to make a good seal.
Someone online is asking, do you have any collaborations coming up?
Always lots. I have, I'm working with some of the students with some things, some projects. I'm definitely starting a big project with my assistant Trina, which we probably won't finish this week. We might do some smalls together, but we've got some really fun plans for some larger scale pieces. Also, I have a show at the end of September. That's gonna have quite a few collaborations, but I'm not gonna let you know who they are just yet. It's nice for shows to be like Christmas morning. Surprises are good. When my brother told me there was no Santa and I found those gifts in the, I hope I didn't ruin that. You might want to edit that out for any kids. Christmas wasn't fun anymore after that. Santa's real.
Did you slip? Okay. Did you accidentally tell her that?
Oh, my daughter still believes in Santa. She's 17. All right, so now I've switched sides and I'm going to adjust the amount of glass I have here for the body. There's going to be a little clear constriction there, so a little tap in that frit. And now, with a little heat, some gravity, and slight inflation, I'm going to give some nice posture to the body.
Have you always worked on that torch, on a Herbie?
I started on a minor burner, and at that point, Joe Peters, an extremely talented glass blower, was working in my studio, and he saw me struggling on that tiny minor burner, and he informed me he had a box with a Herbert Arnold 40 mil that he had borrowed from somebody that I could play with, and so I switched to that, and I've used that type of torch ever since. Right, so I inflated him, a little chubbier belly, and then just with a little heat and gravity, instead of looking stiff, I can give him a little paunch and curve to his body. Okay. So I have one of these further along in process in the kiln, so I'm going to skip a little bit of decoration on this. I would usually texture and seam this up before I do this next step, but I want to show you how I do also a torn element. So he's going to have a little cotton exposure in his belly. I'll take a white stringer and draw on some white.
What color white is that?
This is Molten Aura, a Lotus white, one of the, I think, best whites on the market. It's super workable, doesn't get bubbly. Nice pure white. But I encourage you, if you're a beginner, to practice with some other whites, because this white is also the most expensive and hard to get white on the market. Right, so there's this lump of cotton. Kind of gives the idea that he's torn open, but what really helps is by adding some fabric tears. And so what I do is I take a red stringer of that same color, and I'm going to coil up a little color on this side, and I'm even only just going to do one example of this before I switch over.
We have another question from online. This one's from Squishy Glass.
Hi,
and
Squishy.
He's asking, when was the most influential or impactful time in your career?
I think it was when I was when I first touched glass. It blew my mind and it changed my life, and I knew from that first day, and that was at the furnace, that's what I wanted to do. But it was the transition between the furnace and the flame, and when I got involved with the pipe makers and their collaborations, that was the most influential time. To see all the sharing of ideas and the combination, people get to be experts at certain techniques. And so if two people bring their expertise together, it's really amazing the narratives you can create and the pieces you can create together versus on your own. And it's an incredible learning process. You learn from each other. So I'd say around 2010 was like a really mind-blowing time for me. All right, so now you can see I added some glass I used a small torch to make sure the seal was good on both sides, and then I manipulated it, and it ends up looking like a little torn section. I'm going to skip a lot of the other decoration and pop a hole in the leg, because one leg is going to be hollow, and that will become the mouthpiece of this pipe. So again, and I hope I'm answering your questions well enough. Here we go. Again, pop a hole. Again, you could see how thick it was from how long it took me to get a hole to pop in there. Open that up. And then before I attach my leg, I'm going to make what's called a bridge, a small connection of glass up on my clear that I can brace to weld that leg on without it moving. So I'll just seal a little nub on here, temporary connection.
You notice that seal he did on that tube was definitely a nice, clean, hot seal, so it wouldn't crack.
Yeah, you don't want you don't want any edges in here, or it will crack and your whole piece will end up on the ground.
That would be really sad.
I pre-made a leg with texture and all, and now I'm going to seal it on that hole. Make sure it touches all the way around. Then I'm going to take this clear rod and bridge back to brace it.
What size is that clear rod you're?
6 mil. I like really small punties for this type of thing, because it means I can move through and bend and get it welded on really quickly and retain the heat in the piece, so I can go right in on that weld and heat it. I'm blowing a little bit. I'm letting those two glasses flow together and become one. If you don't do this well, the slightest bump and that leg would fall off. Again, I don't move through things this fast at home, but I'm going to keep pushing. I have one almost done in the kiln that I'm going to switch to shortly, so you can just see some arm and leg attachments. Remove the bridge.
And those are tungsten tweezers you're using for that.
I love tungsten tweezers. You get them right in the flame and not worry about melting them.
That's actually a perfect segue into our next question, which is, what's the tool you value the most and why?
The tungsten tweezers, my blow hose. I really love tungsten tweezers, the tungsten picks. Man, I'm gonna just end up listing everything on my table. I love them all. All right, so now I need to transfer this. Yeah, I love my jacks. I brought these, I've used from 1999. You can still see every Christmas ornament I've jacked in right there. They're very loved. All right, now I need to pop a hole in the leg so I can now switch it around and close off the top. But now with the magic of television, I'm going to go over here. Take out the one we've started. So once I get to that point, I want to start to establish the function of the piece. So I'm going to pop a hole in the back of the head and push a bowl. And you can see how much deeper that red gets as it sits in the kiln.
When you first started making these, did you start by making them in different order of operations, like maybe connecting the arms and legs and then pushing the bowl and then figured out this was the best way?
It's a puzzle putting together the process, one that I very much enjoy and relates back to my music career, is like, because I was a musician before a glassblower, to me it's the same process of like figuring out the structure of a song. And yeah, as you organize the steps, you refine it and figure out the best way to do things. And when I first transitioned to the torch, for any furnace worker will understand, every time I open the mouthpiece to finish a piece, I'd actually add a punty to the bottom of the bubble, finish it, and then remove the punty, which I learned you don't need a punty, you just need to hold on to it with a claw. So if you own one of my earliest pieces, you'll probably see a punty mark on the bottom, and that's why. All right, I'm gonna pop a little hole. So that's the hole, and now I need to push it in so you can put some weed in there. Or whatever. If it's tobacco, I don't think anybody uses it for tobacco, but. So now I have my bowl. I'm going to widen that hole just a little bit. You don't want it to clog too fast. The other important part for a functioning pipe is called a carb, and that's another hole that will go on the side of the head that you put your thumb over. As you use one of these, it fills with smoke, and the best way to clear it is to have a hole called a carb. You put your thumb over as you inhale, and then you let go, and that allows the smoke to clear the chamber. So I will pop another hole. And to do so, I'll need to clog the hole I just created so it pops more easily. I like my carb on the left side, so I pick a spot. Little puffs, yeah. Anytime I like manipulate the glass, I don't fully commit until I see how the glass is moving and how it feels. All right, Sue's got now a hole in the back with a bowl push and a hole for the carb. Now he's missing his arms and legs. This leg I already formed. I'm gonna put this in the kiln and I'm gonna show you how I form a leg. This next leg will be solid. I've pre-shaped some of that same colored glass. And now I'm going to give it a seam and some texture as well.
And you said that one's solid, correct?
This one's solid. Yep, the only one that needs to be hollow is the mouthpiece. So the other attachments will be solid. Same set of events, I will add some stitches. So I know I'm showing you a lot of my techniques here, and I think it would be great if you tried them. I encourage you to explore some of the things I'm showing you if you're a flame worker, but I'm not encouraging you to just make my work. Try to use what you're seeing and adapt it. People like originality.
What are some other colors that you would recommend for working on the surface?
Silver Strike number 5 from Glass Alchemy is awesome. And Peacock Chameleon, also Glass Alchemy. They're full of silver, and if you want an opaque piece on the surface, that silver fumes it up so nicely it gets opaque really fast. I love Portland Gray and some other colors as well, but they take quite a few more coats of prep. So if you're just starting out and you want to try something, I would recommend some of the colors with high silver content. Very workable. So my strainer just got stuck in the glass. It got a little too hot. It happens. It's okay. All right, so now I have a textured leg with some seams. add a couple creases, and also use 6mm rod to punty it on the bottom again, and get ready to add it to the doll in the kiln. So temporary connection, doesn't have to be a perfect seal down there.
So that connection you just put on was a cold seal?
Yeah, pretty much.
Or a hot
yeah,
seal, either would work?
Either would work. Cold seal is easier to clean up afterwards. All right, so I got my other leg. I'm gonna get the body. And add the other leg. I can see it's a little long, so I'll pull off a little extra material. And then I'll heat that one spot where it's going to get added. I push and pull. I'm also checking now and then that he's gonna make contact with the ground everywhere. And I already have that little bridge nub set up on my handle.
So when you did that connection, you had both sides hot,
Both
pressed
sides
in
hot.
firm,
Yep.
and then did a pull to smooth out the
Pulled away.
transition.
Yeah, you want to, I always try to shoot to make the perfect seal in one touch, but they're not always perfect. And this little mini torch is also an invaluable tool to go back in on those welds and make the glass flow naturally together and add that strength. You can see him coming together now. Now he just needs 2 arms, but I'm going to show you 2 variations on arms. One arm that's full and one that's torn off. And a lot of elements in my work kind of volunteered themselves from trial and error. The first time I tore off an arm and added cotton, it actually was a piece that the arm cracked while I was working, and I had half left, and I decided to just add some white and some ruffle and make it look like he's just weathered and beaten. All right. Texture the bottom of that. And I'll put this back in the kiln while I form the first arm. I started pre-shaping some of that same color. I'm going to add texture and stitches to this. You can see I've squished a little bit of that in to give him a little bit of a hand that will be laying out flat. Going in with the knife first. Said this in my slideshow yesterday that I gave. If I could go back and tell myself at 20 years old when I took a class here that I'd be teaching here and doing a live stream, I wouldn't have believed it, especially if you told me I would be teaching flameworking, because I was so furnace working focused for the first 12 years of my career. But glass is glass. Glass is fun. Try all types. They all relate to each other. Mix them together. You can really create something original. Little texture on here. Another thing that I've said to my students over and over, to get better, you have to make yourself uncomfortable. Try things that you're not good at, because you have to make a lot of not good glass to learn to make good glass. And people love gifts of not good glass. And my mom's basement's full of it.
Or that mug you drink out of every time you go to their house?
My first slide, my slideshow, was the first cup I ever made that my parents still fill with beer for family gatherings and give to me. Fits about 8 ounces. It's super lopsided, and I think the lip is like a 1/2 inch thick of glass. It's a lot. But it's a good reminder. It's always, especially for new glass blowers, all of your heroes and all of your favorite glass blowers made crappy glass first.
They all start in the same place.
Yep. But if you get the bug, and I know a lot of you can relate to this when you get the bug, Trina and I were talking about like driving non-glass friends absolutely nuts at the beginning of our career because we just wouldn't stop talking about glass. Like, can we talk about something else? Nope. It's like all consuming at first. All right, so I've added my stitches, a couple creases, and now this is going to be my first arm. I'll put a cold seal punty on the palm. I was just going to ask my student for a big piece of graphite, and he read my mind, and it's here already. Thank you, Will. Little glass stuck there. Okay, this is the same attachment move as I did for the leg. So you don't, this is like process. First time I did this, I put the full arm on the side of the carb, and then it's really hard to get your thumb in there. So I put the full arm on the opposite side. And then I put the torn arm on the carb side so that it's not in the way of the function. That's all trial and error. Add the arm. On the graphite, I can check that it's touching. That wasn't supposed to disconnect, but that's okay. You're seeing real life glass blowing here. Stay calm. Grab another punty and bridge with that. Because that was a good example of a great cold seal. Popped right off, just not really when I wanted to. I put a little too much pressure on the cold seal. Same thing, weld back to that little important little nub of glass I attached to the handle earlier. And the mini torch. And if you've done a good detachment job at first, there's very little mini torch welding you need to do. You just want to make sure there's no acute angles left in that glass. You can get away with that, and that was an adjustment for me. You can get away with that in the hot shop, but definitely not on a functional pipe. You'd be replacing arms for customers constantly if they were cold seals. All right, so I'll remove that bridge. We're getting there. And the cold seal, I should just be able to wiggle and it'll come right off, and I can clean up that attachment point. And then again, I'm going to bring this over and let it sit in the kiln while I form the torn arm. Here's some raw material I already fritted up. I'm going to pull off a little bit for the nub of an arm here. This will be a hot seal onto the end of that, and I'll just pull off a small portion. He doesn't need much. Coming back to the question of favorite tools, another tool I love are my diamond shears from the hot shop. I use them all the time. And this L graphite marver on the top of my torch. You can see it's my extra hand. It holds my pipe in place while I have to use my other two hands to do things. I called it a pipe. It's not a pipe. It's glass punty. All right, so I just need a little bit of that red for the torn arm. I'll refrit it, shape it a little bit. Now I'm going to concentrate the heat on the tip of that and give it a little squish. Earlier on the belly, I had to add material to create the tear. Here, I'll give a little squish and eventually be able to use that as my torn material. Now I'm going to take more of that molten aura white and add some cotton. This is kind of fun. The cotton's fun because the messier it goes on, the better it looks. Just smash a little on there. Swirl it around. Just grab my tweezers and manipulate it a little bit. So now I got some cotton on there. That's not a perfect seal, but the next process of tearing really helps seal that on. So I grab some crimps and squish that edge that I've left all the way around. Now I've got material I can pull off and little points everywhere, really make it try to look ragged and uneven. And these would be super fragile if you left them sticking out, so then I go back around and give them like little folds and twists. Now I'm going to punty up right onto that white with another cold seal.
So generally for your punties, you're using 4 and 6 mil?
I usually mostly use 6. I just picked one up and it was 4. It will work, but I like a little bit bigger. I prefer 6. All right, just a little texture in there. And now I'm going to go grab that doll and stick the last arm on. The torn arm. Same process. Stick it, heat both sides, push, pull. Now he's got all his limbs. I'll remove that punty. Fire polish that cold seal. Make sure he's laying down. I got to move that arm down a little bit, so while I still got some heat in it, I'll preheat it, lay it down, and push it into place. I've got good contact everywhere. It's not going to wiggle. It's going to lay flat. What I love about these is when they're laying on your table, you can't tell they're a pipe at all. So now he's missing an eye. But before I do that, since I have an extra minute, I'm also going to add, I took a little bit of Electrum, which is this new molten aura color that looks like metal, and I made a nail head. And they're voodoo dolls, so sometimes they're tortured. So what I'm going to do on this one is put a nail through his head. So I will seal this little guy on one side. And this punny becomes a, what did you call it? A
Puntito.
Puntito. And it allows me to then grab glass hot spot on the other side. And if you can see, I've pulled the surface of that out, and it looks like now that if there's some surface tension there, like that nail's going through the head. Gonna revisit this little weld to make sure it's got integrity. It's another trick I've been showing my students. When you're welding without a bridge, you turn your mini torch's propane off. You have a nice air source to cool one side. Then quarter seal and heat the other side. Cool that off. This is so it doesn't wiggle around while I'm getting the weld done. Once the weld's good, also make sure to flame polish the nail. And now the last step is going to be adding the button. I'm going to stick this in a kiln for a second and form a little, I think a blue button would be a nice contrast here. And we'll add the button, and once the button's on, we're going to mouthpiece it and we'll be finished. To make the button, I'm going to attach a little blue to a rod here. I choose nice opaque colors because they look super plasticky once I've blasted the rest of the piece. Is plasticky a word? I don't know.
Yes.
It works.
It's definitely a word.
All right. I'm just attaching to the clear so I have more clearance from the flame while I form and gather a little bit of the blue on the end to form into the button.
What color is that? Is that aqua
This one
azul?
is aqua azul,
Yeah.
beautiful, smooth, easy to work blue from Glass Alchemy. I use a lot of Glass Alchemy color. Their opaque palette is really workable and beautiful. So I'm just heating a little glass off the end. This is like one of the first things I showed my students to do is how to make my buttons. All these little things are great skill builders for centering, and you got a little fun little button in the end. So I make a little ball, and then start squishing it. And then to really flatten out, I sandwich it between my marver and the paddle and turn and push. So now I have a little disc. Now it needs some stitches. So I got another one of my black fine threads. I don't always hit where I want, so sometimes I have to fix it. That awesome glass mantra, it's not what you can make, it's what you can fix. So very, very true. You can see my coffee shakes aren't helping me. There we go. I have a little crisscross, and again with the tungsten pick. I'm going to grab the termination and push in. Now I have a button and it's threaded, and you see the holes. I have one pre-made. I'm going to stick the pre-made one on that piece right now. So now I'll come out and just heat the back of the button in the spot where I'm going to attach it. And I make the surface area hotter than the back of the button. So when I push it on, it actually pushes in and almost creates the illusion of it being sewn and bunched there as well. So here comes the button stick. And I push it way in. And I don't even worry about the little acute angle. It makes it look realistic. And I'm not going to work on it much longer. It's got the integrity. Fire polish the button. I'm going to flash it a little bit so I can go straight to my finishing tools. And so back in the day, I would have stuck another punny on to do this move. Not anymore. Just grab it with these tools. And to pop the hole in the mouthpiece, I'll pull that bubble out nice and thin to a little point. Then I'll heat up a little clear. Stick hot glass over that cold nub. Let it set up so it gets cold, and I've purposely caught a cold seal an acute angle. So all it takes is a little tap. Now I have a hole. Make that hole nice and round. And that leg needs texture too, so I'll finish by pressing a little bit more with my texture tool. And there you have it, the finished little voodoo doll laying down. He's functional, and he's going to the kiln. And it's exactly 12 noon. I couldn't have timed that any better.
That's absolutely amazing.
Voila. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Corning, for having me.